Hey everybody, this is Joseph S. Samaniego, and I am the author of the Carolingian Age series. And you can actually pick up the latest of that series, Scorned, on Amazon right now. The link will be in the description. Just came out a week ago today, so go ahead and check it out. I am here to talk to you about something a little different. This isn't a history talk, although we can make inferences to history. I'm here to talk to you about one of the best video games, the series, best video game series ever, and that is Suikoden. And let us get into it. So, beginning in 1996 here in North America, and 95 in Japan, we had this series start. And this was a very low key series, honestly. And a lot of it really did get kind of brushed aside here, especially here in North America, by the release of Final Fantasy VII, which is a landmark classic game for RPG as well. But what Final Fantasy VII did, Suikoden did very different. And I mean, we this is actually more of a throwback to the older RPGs that you see. Which RPG, the role playing game, you're taking on the role of the protagonist, and in this case, it's a teenage boy who's a son of the main general, basically the hero of this particular empire, and you have to basically rebel against the empire because you realize the corruption and you realize that people are suffering. You're thrown into it firsthand, and it's really by almost happenstance that you're thrown into it. But here you are thrown into that atmosphere and into that role of being the leader, so to speak. It's almost very much of a chosen one standpoint, but it's not a prophetic thing. It's not, oh my God, he's the one that they spoke about, the ancients spoke about thousands of years. No, it's because you were in the right place at the right time, and you have this certain thing about you emotionally, and you have a certain thing about you physically because you actually end up becoming inheritor of this particular rune, and it's a true rune, and that's how the magic system works throughout this whole series is with the runes. Now they do change it up game to game, and that's for better or worse. But let's just delve into this whole aspect of this game and why it's so great because really it goes deeper than just playing a game. So let's look at this from another standpoint. In a lot of RPGs, you have a team. You're the protagonist, but at the same time, you're bringing on people that is helpful in some way. Final Fantasy is very big for that. You have several main characters, four or five, that you're traveling with, and usually you can switch out a couple here and there. Chrono Cross did the same thing. Chrono Trigger, all of them, they all kind of follow that formula. They broke that formula here, and they did it in a very I did say there was some historical influences. Now they did it with 108 characters. These are 108 people that you have to recruit to have the number one, the best ending, the best experience, but also they help along the way more than just being part of your team when you're going into battles or when you're doing a quest. Now, this influence came from Water Margin, which is an ancient. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. Ancient Chinese tale, and I want to say it's part of the Three Kingdoms period, but that's where this kind of was influenced by. And you can even look it up still, and there's still even different games surrounding that. And the characters are actually named for stars. It's 108 stars, and they're named for different stars. And they actually cross over into other games very similar. So one character who will be this particular star in this game, their counterpart in another game, if they're not played by the same character, will be very similar in personality or in function. And the function is very big because you actually, in all these games, you have a headquarters, you have a home, and you create that home. And you build that home up from really from nothing. I would say number four is the only one that is kind of already built for you. But in numbers one and two, they're dilapidated fortresses, basically. And you build it up. Two is basically is the best one. And we're going to get more into that in a few minutes. But as you bring these characters on, they either open up shop or they open up a bathhouse, even restaurants, an inn, storage units, dock works, different things that allow you to have this immersion of, okay, this is actually a viable location. This is something that if was in real life, we could live here because hey, now we have farming, now we have food, farming. Most of them near water, so you have fishing as well. You have a trade network. You have shops and armory and blacksmiths, stuff like that. So it actually makes sense. And that's one of the real cool emergent things because what you're able to do is you're able to build up your castle or your fortress. Number 4 was a ship. 2 and 3, they were basically cities. And number 5 was back to a fortress. But you're able to really focus on, building up the best fortress or city you can build to also help build up your army, build up yourself. So it was really, you had to pay attention to what you were doing as far as this particular role as being the leader. And choices mattered, especially as the games went on later, but not as much as like say in Fable or other games or like Mass Effect where choices are super, super critical. Here it was really the start of a lot of that. So, and even with the endings, because the choices matter for your ending to some extent. And even with that, and I'm not going to give spoilers and give endings. I mean, you could look it up or probably played it anyway. But they really did begin a lot of that here in this game and in this series. So let's look at some more from the series. Now, Suikoden actually takes place in a medieval world setting with a lot of Asian influence in it. And you get a lot of that in the music. And a lot of people will say that this series has the best music of any RPG series. And I would have to agree with that. I use that as part of my writing playlist for when I'm writing books. I use it just as, background music for when I'm at work and just need some noise in the background. I use this series as a playlist, and it really is amazing. And number 2 in the series really took it to a next level by incorporating a lot more of actual live instruments. And by doing that, they really brought a deeper level of immersion. And we get a lot of that too in the storylines because you have characters who will basically bridge a lot of gaps between games. You have characters who are in all the games, and you have some characters who are in 2 or 3. And you get to see the progression of their storylines, especially if they're main characters such as Clive or Lorelei, who have a deeper storyline within their own. And it allows for some continuity within the games themselves, because the games are actually out of order if you were to buy them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because the actual order goes 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, with number 4 being about 150 years before the events of the first game. And I think number 5's probably about 5 or 6 years before the events of the first game. Then number 2 is 3 years after, and I think it's 15 years after that for number 3. And what that really did was it did kind of screw up with some of the continuity, but then they kind of went back and made reasons why, and they kind of corrected some of the plot holes. But it also gives you a sense, especially when you're playing number 5 and you're seeing characters from 1 and 2, and you're able to kind of see their backstories. So it really adds to that extra level of storytelling that you get. And that's what's really great about a lot of these games, RPGs, is that you have a deeper story into these. And this one, as I said, it does have some kind of historical roots, but it has a lot of cultural influences. I did say that there's a lot of Asian influence, but there's also a lot of the medieval historical influence coming through. Number 4 has a great deal of pirate and just pirate culture and nautical culture, because it did take place mostly in the island nation, so on a ship. Number 5 kind of had a little bit more river, so you still had a boat, you still had some nautical stuff, but you were also on land a lot. Number 5 was a little bit more quirky in parts, but it did, as I said, kind of bridge a lot of gaps between number 4 and number 1 to really kind of drive home the storytelling for the series in itself, because number 3 really ended the series. So it's kind of, everyone says they want number 6, and I do too, but we're not really going to get number 6 in this particular standpoint, because number 3 basically ended, the world was saved type of thing. But, going in deeper, this game meant a lot to a lot of people. And that's really one thing that always drives me about it. And hearing the nostalgia, because it really did showcase a lot. Now, the combat system from number 1 and 2 were really the same, as you can see in the bottom 2 pictures there. The combat system, 3 against however, or excuse me, 6 against however many. And number 4 had, number 3 was also 6, but you moved around more and your magic could affect your own people. Number 4, it was 4 against however many. And number 5 brought the 6 back. So it looked more like these 2 here. And I'm not going to show every example just because it would be a little too time consuming. The major war battles really changed too between 1 and all the other games. In fact, every game was a little bit different, 2 being my favorite. But number 1, it was basically just 2 major armies in a pitched battle every time. And if you chose certain attack elements such as charging or archery or magic, then your army would correspond. Whereas in number 2, you had specialized units that could do certain things. Some were archery units, some were melee units, some were magic units, and they could move correspondingly and attack correspondingly. And it was done more in squads, which you can see there. And you have attack powers and defense powers. Number 3 it looked more like just regular battles, honestly. And number 4 was ship battles, which I should put a picture of that. That'd be cool. And you used runes. You used your rune cannons. So that was actually pretty cool, in my opinion. A lot of people didn't like it. I actually loved it. And number 5 went back to the kind of squad battles, but they were moving. So it was a real time moving thing, and it got kind of tricky. So, but no, I always like this. It was pretty cool, and it really kind of helped a lot. And obviously, you want to keep your people alive as much as possible. I think number 2 was really great for that. You could kind of focus who was on what teams and who was on what squadrons. So that really helped you to build a better army, in my opinion. So I hope that by me talking about the game to some extent and to this series has more or less made you want to say, hey, I might check that out. I know that you can get some emulators and then of course I think a couple of them are available on the PlayStation Network. And I hope that if you're a fan of the series, you're not going to be upset that I kind of oversimplified the game, because it is an immense undertaking to talk about this game in full detail. This series, excuse me. So I hope I didn't oversimplify things too much. For me, this game, though, was really the catalyst for a lot of my fantasy writing. I already had the inspirations from Conan the Barbarian and other series and other games, a few other games that I enjoyed. But for me, this game really set in motion a visual experience for, not only with maps. The maps in this series are amazing, and you really focus on them, but just for magic in general and how interactive to be. When you're talking about the dialogue is heavy in these series. So it really did play a lot into my inspirations. And also for video game choices. I love to play RPGs, and a big part of that is because of this game. And I still measure an RPG or any kind of game like this to this series to see, especially to number 2, is it going to make me feel the same way? These came out when I was a teenager. Number 1 and 2 did. And in fact, my brother bought me number 1 for my birthday. It was one of those, hey, just pick out a game you want and I'll pay for it. And there's your birthday present. And so that really meant something. And the cool thing about it is the cover of number 1 has nothing to do, at least the American cover, the North American cover, nothing to do really with the game. It's very weird. It kind of does and it kind of doesn't. But I took a chance on buying it, on getting it, and I love it. And it's just really one of the best games I've ever played. Number 2, I would probably have to rank as the best game. And it just kind of gets that nostalgia factor, as a teenager playing video games with my friends or wherever. If I was by myself, when I wasn't writing or listening to music, I was probably playing this game or one in the series or a similar game. Because there are other great RPGs. And as I said, this was kind of like an alternative to Final Fantasy, which is not a knock on Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy series is amazing. And it's kind of like to set the bar standard for RPGs, but this one is different enough to really be in its own class. And so when I see things like Ready Player One or Pixels, and you kind of get that nostalgia of what it was like in the arcades or what it was like playing video games at home, this is one that really kind of comes to mind. So I love it. I always play it. I still play it now. It's just great, and I'm looking forward to the spiritual successors that are coming out, and because I think they're going to be great too. And these are some games that I think will go down in history as being underrated in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to the storytelling, their visuals, just the kind of the out there aspect of a lot of things that he did. I mean, rune cannons in number 4 was a crazy cool idea. Like I said, I know a lot of people didn't like it. The visuals of the magic of the spells, the rune spells that they used were just really awesome. Even the graphics even today still kind of hold up, especially when you think about the magic it has, and just the storytelling that it used, an ancient Chinese kind of story and fable to create this monumental series. I mean, we're talking about hours of gameplay. I mean, I think number 2 is probably the longest, and you can easily do 60 to 80 hours because of all the mini games and all the side quests and everything else. And yet there's a version of it where you have to beat it in 20 hours to see this one particular storyline with Clive. So that forces you to play within like 20 hours. So it's definitely a game of very different nuances, and I love that. And so be sure to check it out. Check out other RPGs. Let me know in the comments what you think of not only this one, but other RPGs. Maybe there's some that I haven't played or haven't seen or heard of, because there's so many. And let's discuss. I'm always happy to check out some recommendations. Don't forget, you can check out my new book, Scorned. It's the tale of a illegitimate princess who is denied her birthright. So she basically goes to make her own name and win her own fame and fortune until something brings her back home, and she has to fight for her birthright. And that's where I'm going to leave that. So be sure to check it out. It's on Amazon, and you can get paperbacks from my website starting next week. Until then, this is Joseph S. Samaniego, fantasy author and cartographer. These games have a lot of great maps too. So be sure to check it out, and I'll see you next time. Take care.